Hey, hey, hey. What's up? What's up? What's up, good people? This is Zakiya, and this is the first episode of Truth Telling Uncensored with your host, Zakiya Sankara-Jabar. I'm new at this, y'all. Please be patient with me. Also, don't crack on me too hard for this background. This is not my house. Thankfully, my husband surprised me today with a trip to the beach. So we are at a beach house here on Rehoboth Beach in Delaware. And I was a little sad today because the CDC, the government, everybody canceled Thanksgiving. And so my family canceled our annual Thanksgiving plans. Usually we're down in Alabama with my family Thanksgiving. And so I was really sad about that. You know, this has been a really hard year. I imagine it's been very hard for you all too, in terms of just your whole life being kind of adjusted, especially if you have children. This has definitely been an adjustment. So this is the first episode, and I decided that I wanted to define myself. For people who may not know me, uh, I think it's important to be self-determining and to define yourself and not let other people define you. So I wanted to tell you who I am, what shaped my worldview, how I got here, and yeah, why I'm here and doing a video today. I know people are enjoying their families. You should be. But I think Thursdays at 8 is probably going to be our regular time that I'll be meeting with you all. And so let's see how I kind of want to talk about this. First, like the video, share the video. Y'all know this thing. When people start their YouTube channel, everybody be like, share, subscribe. So that's my thing. Like, share, subscribe to the video. Yeah, so I'll hop on in and just share a little bit more about me and who I am and what shaped my worldview. So you see the title of this channel is Truth Telling Uncensored, right? That's who I am, unapologetically Black, identify as Africana womanist. I am, a Pan-Africanist, Black nationalist, all of that. But I love people, and I love people who are at the margins. People who are oftentimes forgotten about in society, people, people don't oftentimes think that matter if you don't have money, if you're in poverty, or, if you're homeless. Those are the people I tend to stick up for, particularly children and families. So early on in my life, I had a rough start. Both of my parents, unfortunately, were unable to raise me. So I ended up being raised in the rural South. Folks who know me know I grew up in Alabama. I grew up in the Black Belt, which is a collection of counties in central Alabama that's predominantly African American. I grew up in Beloit, Alabama, which is right outside of Selma. It's the same county as Selma. So people know Selma as the root of the modern day civil rights movement. In the 60s, there was a whole movie that came out about Selma, I believe in 2008. And so it's funny, I can say this now, but for a long time, I was actually ashamed to tell people that's where I was from, to tell people that I grew up in this little rural place, Alabama. And then I remember when the movie came out, and of course, the civil rights history and all that kind of stuff came out, it kind of shifted for me, how I felt about, telling people, well, yeah, I grew up there, and shared my experiences of growing up there in the schools that I went through. I actually had a very Black experience because of that. Growing up, I didn't grow up. In fact, I don't think I had any white kids in my class. I grew up in rural Alabama. I went to a rural elementary school. The teachers were mixed. I had several white teachers, but I also had a number of Black. All of the kids in the schools, were Black. I didn't see that as an aberration or anything like that. But it certainly shaped who I am. Um, and when my great grandmother passed away, I actually ended up moving back to Ohio because I was born in Ohio, in Cleveland. Shout out to Cleveland. Still lots of family there. My dad still lives there, and I still go back and visit there a lot as well. But I moved to Dayton and lived in Dayton for 20 years. Graduated high school. I finished my last 2 years of high school in Dayton, Ohio, and went to college in Dayton. Met my first husband, my son's at Dayton, and also met my second husband, who was my current husband and the love of my life, Hashem, in Dayton. And I have two children. Both of them were born in Dayton. So lots of my professional experiences in Dayton, and I'll certainly get into that because I think it's really critically important to, my political, stance, that my political analysis is certainly important to think about and view the world. So I worked for the government for 10 years in Ohio. I actually worked for the state of Ohio for 10 years and then transitioned out of working for the state of Ohio into starting my own nonprofit. I started my own nonprofit called Racial Justice Now. I'm the co-founder with Professor Vernelia Randall. And I started that organization because of how my son was being treated in school. Many of you may know about the preschool to prison pipeline. That is an issue in this country, targets Black children, particularly Black boys. And that was my experience with my son. So as a mom, just intuitively, I wasn't, a natural organizer because I certainly did the work and I did it very well. But I didn't go to school for it. Like I wasn't a professional organizer. I'm considered a professional now in the nonprofit industrial complex, but we'll get to that later. But I started my own organization, didn't know, about funding and, 501c3, didn't know any of that. I just started doing the work because, this injustice was happening to my baby, but not just to my baby. The injustices were happening to other babies in the preschool as I started to talk to other Black women at that school, other Black parents. And there was a theme that emerged. The Black mamas who had Black sons had experienced similar things that I had. The white teachers, particularly white women, were targeting our children, saying horrible things about our sons, making assumptions about our sons, their teachers, but saying that they have ADHD and all these other things. Which, at any rate, that is how I got into organizing. That is how I got in touch with the social justice movement and pushing back against anti-Blackness in our schools. Before that, however, I was involved locally with the Democratic Party with my great aunt, Creola Reese, who was a prominent civil rights activist in the Dayton area. She worked with African-American legislators like C.J. McLean, and certainly has a lot of her own political ties with former powerful Democratic Governor Dick Celeste and all of those people. So I certainly was connected as a young person, certainly coming out of high school. I was a part of the AXO group for folks who are in the NAACP. I was a part of the NAACP AXO group in high school and as a young adult. But as those experiences continued to evolve, I started to see a theme. And I was like, oh, okay, some of this is not actually about justice and righteousness. It's not, because I would see kind of like the games that were being played, the plays behind the scenes, the meetings before the meetings that were happening. And that happened locally with the Montgomery County, Ohio Democratic Party. Now, my aunt was very involved in the Democratic Party, like actually in the party politics, like deciding, who will get endorsed to be candidates, like all of the behind the scenes, like backroom stuff. I got a chance to see that as a young adult. Now being in 2020 and we may be back there, who knows? But I remember then I was heartbroken. Just think about it, like I was heartbroken. I remember I cried when Gore didn't, the Supreme Court said that he wasn't going to be the president. I mean, I think about like where I am at now politically, and like where I was then, and it's hilarious. I've grown, so much. But certainly, I started off like everybody else, just doing what your family does, right? Or being involved, or, not necessarily at that time thinking critically or thinking for myself. Now, as I continue to have experiences and continue to work within the political and social apparatus, I started to see things that gave answers to why our community continued to look the way that it did, right? To why our community continued not to get the things that we needed for our material conditions. And so that led to me, of course, organizing, but also doing a shift. And really for several years, not having a political home. I mean, technically, I probably don't necessarily have a political home now. I identify as a political independent, but I certainly participate in the system. I do vote. I'm not an advocate necessarily of not voting, even though I know for some people that is a strategy. I do think that local elections matter. And I think that just being an involved and knowledgeable citizen is important. So I support people who say we should have an agenda before, actually going to vote. I do not believe in just voting a party line, whether that's Democrat or Republican. I believe in actually engaging these people. And I'll tell you why. Back to the experience with organizing and being a co-founder of Racial Justice Now, this is a very real experience. And there are people who I organize with who could corroborate this story, once this video gets out. But I'll tell you, when I was organizing with other poor, I'm talking about working class Black women. I'm talking about Black women who had lost their jobs because their kids kept being suspended and expelled from schools, right? These things continue to happen to this day in 2020. But we were organizing to change Ohio's zero tolerance law, right? Because there was a zero tolerance law in the state of Ohio that says, we have zero tolerance for X, Y, and Z, right? And so the local school districts and school boards was using the state law to say, well, we have to suspend these kids. We have to expel these kids, even though the law, when we actually read it, and my co-founder, Vernelia Randall, who at the time was a professor of law at the University, the Dayton School of Law, interpretation was that, well, the school districts are pretty much interpreting the law that way, but it does not spell out that if a child does X, Y, and Z, you have to expel them. That is the interpretation of the school district. So that was lesson number one, that school districts were interpreting the law in the most harmful way. And so one of the things that we did was embark on a campaign to change local policy, which we did in Dayton Public School. We were able to get the school district to stop expelling 3-year-olds. Unfortunately, Dayton, Akron, and there was one other school district. I know Akron was one of the school districts, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the other big 8 school district in Ohio that were literally on record with the Ohio Department of Education of expelling 3-year-old children from preschool, right? So we were able to get the Dayton School Board to end that practice to the chagrin of the teachers union. The teachers union was our biggest opponent in changing these policies and practices that literally criminalized our children and started our children on a preschool to prison pipeline there in Ohio. The preschool to prison pipeline is an issue across the country, but our work obviously was started in Ohio because that is where I had my experience with my son. Getting to the political piece, right? And this was a very powerful lesson for me, a very powerful lesson for me. We engaged our state representative, who was a Democrat, at the time. Fred Strayhorn was our representative, District 39 in Ohio, which represents Dayton, huge parts of West Dayton, which is predominantly African-American. He's an African-American legislator. And I remember Professor Randall and I met with him, and we were talking to him about these issues that we were having. We gave the data over to him, and we said, we really need to look at repealing this law within, Ohio. Now, there was already a bill in the Senate that was pending by State Senator Charlita Tavares, who's also a Black Democrat, a Black state senator who represented the Columbus area. She had already submitted a bill, but because the Republicans control the House, Senate, and the governorship in Ohio, the bill did not get a hearing. So all of these things is a lesson for me, just in terms of how bills are made, who has the power to do this, who has the power to do that. That's technically called in my field a landscape analysis, right? To know who has the power to get something done. And so when we met with him, his question for us was, okay, do you want like a real bill or a cosmetic bill? And I'm like, a cosmetic bill? I don't even know what she's talking about. We want this bill to be repealed. Like, that's what we want. And we actually never heard from that brother after that. After that meeting, he would not answer our calls anymore. He would not respond to us anymore. And so then we went into talk to State Senator Charlita Tavares. She told us, well, I've introduced the bill, but I can't get a hearing because we don't control the Senate. And I'm like, well, okay, you don't control the Senate. Well, who does control whether the bill gets a hearing or not? She said, oh, you have to talk to State Senator Peggy Lehner. Matter of fact, she represents Dayton. I said, oh, okay. So this is a white woman who is a Republican, and she's one of the most powerful, legislators at the time in the Senate. And she was the chairwoman of the Education Committee. And so we were like, oh, okay, she's right here in Dayton. She actually represents our area. So we called her and we actually got a meeting. To our shock, I wasn't scared to meet with her because she was a white woman and we're a Republican. They told us that's who we need to talk to. That's who we're going to talk to. And much to our surprise, we were actually, I'm going to be honest with you, we were very shocked at the level of engagement that she gave us. We literally sat around with her, all Black women, all Black mothers, and Professor Randall, and we basically read her all of the information that we had, all of the data we had collected. She sat down and listened to all of the stories of the Black mamas who had experienced their children being criminalized. Some of them themselves had been criminalized by the school district. And we said, this has to stop. We need to repeal, this bill. This is disproportionately impacting Black children in this state. And I remember for her, she was actually shocked that this was happening. To make a long story short, that woman actually brought the bill to a full hearing in the Ohio Senate because of us. We were able to organize other groups around the state, like the Children's Defense Fund of Ohio, like ACLU and all the other progressive organizations, and people were able to get on board. They were shocked that the bill was even getting a hearing because they didn't think that, this is a Republican, they're not going to give this bill a hearing. The bill not only got a hearing, it got more hearings. And it did not pass out of that particular General Assembly, but it took us several years to get it done. But we finally got it done. And in 2018, the bill was passed. And we also got a moratorium on suspensions and expulsions for pre-K third grade for all children in the state of Ohio, in all public schools. Grassroots work done to make sure that this happened. So the reason why I bring that up is because for me, I had to learn nuance, right? Nuance is important in politics. And sometimes the people that you think should be for you are not for you. And sometimes the people that you think are always against you, it's about interest conversions. And I'll tell you, the interest conversion for Senator Lehner is that she had also just championed a bill to be passed, championed a bill that did pass the state legislature, which was called the third grade reading law. So if you live in states like Ohio and Florida and Michigan, and you're a parent, you know that your child has to read on grade level by third grade or they are punished in school. So for us, we use that as leverage and say, well, you're passing this law, third grade reading law. How in the hell do you expect these kids to learn how to read if they're already being expelled when they're 3 years old? And that for her, she said, we can't have that. And so that to me, that shaped the whole idea of I'm not voting a straight ticket. I'm voting for my interests. I'm going to vote, in a way that I can actually get some things done for my community instead of just voting a party line vote and hoping and begging somebody to do something for it. That doesn't make any sense. So that has shaped how my political analysis is much more nuanced in a number of ways. That particular experience and a number of other experiences that again that I saw at the local level, where I saw progressive candidates, particularly local candidates, Black candidates, who would come up and go before the Montgomery County Democratic Committee to be screened. That's called being screened to get an endorsement, meaning that if you get the endorsement, you also get funding to run for a local office. I saw so many people, so especially Black people, who were progressive, who really wanted to help their community, continue year after year after year after year, year after year after year after year, get passed over for a white, more centrist, almost really a white Republican, but had a Democrat, on their shoulder and say, well, I'm going to run. And then I would see them go around to Black churches. They would placate us. And then after the election, we would never see them again. You probably can replay this in any city that you live in. You can play this in any city that you live in. And so that's what I think is critically important for us, to have some uncensored truth telling, when it comes to not just politics, but everything. As I mentioned in the first video, this channel will be about politics, love, and relationships. We'll talk about finance, we'll talk about economics, we'll talk about a number of different things. But I wanted to come on here, and do a quick video to define myself before other people start to define me and label me. Now, certainly I can't control what other people say about me, but this video will always be here to share my experience, who I am, how I grew up, how, what shaped my worldview, and, just define myself. And that's something that I thought that was really critically important. So as I wrap up this video, I hope you all like the video. I hope you share it. If you're not already a subscriber, you can please subscribe, and want you all to put on your calendar Thursdays evening at 8 p.m. Eastern time as a regular time that you can come and listen to commentary. Next week, we'll have Dr. Jared Ball on to talk about media literacy. I am very critical of the media. And so I wanted this brother to come on because he's an expert, one of the experts in this country, that's very critical of the media, but also has some historical analysis for how the media actually evolved in this country. So Dr. Jared Ball will be our guest next Thursday at 8 p.m. That's December the 3rd. And he will also talk about his latest book, The Myth of Black Buying Power. I know that's going to be a hot topic, especially, that'll fit in terms of finances and economics, but he'll go into that a lot more. So you'll see I'll feature lots of guests, maybe even be some surprise celebrity appearances that may come on this show. So anyway, this is just the beginning, and I wanted to do this first video to share a little bit more about who I am. And as I wrap up, hopefully you all enjoy this. Hopefully you will like the video and share it and encourage other people to tune in on Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Once a week, I plan to be here. I may do some cameo appearances in between them, but definitely Thursdays at 8 p.m. And next week, we'll have Dr. Jared Ball, who is a professor at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. So with that, I guess I will wrap this video up. I don't want it to be too long, but I will see you all next week. And thanks so much for watching. Take care, everybody. Bye.